find these resort fees are disgusting.
You probably never imagined that a single offhand comment could alter an entire industry like tourism. However, after a controversial statement, the U.S. tourism sector has faced a major shock. Losing nearly $30 billion in revenue from Canadian visitors, America is now dealing with the consequences of political decisions. While cities like Florida and Las Vegas remain as charming as ever, the decline in Canadian tourists has directly impacted hotels, stores, and famous landmarks. This change serves as a reminder that political decisions can have far-reaching effects on everyday citizens, especially in the tourism industry. So, the question is, can the U.S. restore its strong tourism relationship with Canada, or will the tourism sector suffer long-term losses? What are your thoughts on this? If you agree with the impact of politics on U.S. tourism, comment 1 below. If you don't agree, drop a 0. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Tourism in the U.S. has experienced significant fluctuations in recent years, and one of the most notable factors has been the sharp decline in visitors from Canada. Popular U.S. destinations like Florida, Las Vegas, Buffalo, and Maine have long been top choices for Canadian tourists, contributing significantly to the U.S. tourism revenue. However, changes in policy and security issues have led to a dramatic drop in the number of Canadian visitors. For years, Canadian tourists have played a crucial role in the U.S. tourism industry. Not only is Canada a major market with millions of visitors annually, but Canadians also make substantial contributions to the economy of large U.S. cities. Cities like Buffalo, near the border, have always been favorites for Canadian tourists, with short trips and considerable spending at stores, hotels, and restaurants. However, a series of political events have led to a noticeable shift. Statistics show a sharp 37% drop in Canadian visitors at border checkpoints and a 26% decline in international flights. This is not just a number, but a warning sign of a change in international tourism dynamics. Key reasons include political tensions between the two countries, new border policies, and the sense of insecurity felt by some tourists when visiting the U.S. The decline in Canadian tourism has had serious consequences for the U.S. tourism economy. Hotel and shop owners in major destinations like Las Vegas, Maine, and Buffalo have shared the difficulties they face. Revenue has dropped to the point where hotels have had to reduce room rates, and some stores have cut staff to maintain operations. Small business owners report a 30% drop in revenue, a figure that cannot be ignored in the tourism industry. Hotel owners at major resorts in Florida and Las Vegas also report that Canadian visitors accounted for a significant portion of their international guests. Not only did they contribute to direct revenue from room bookings, but Canadian tourists also spent on services such as dining, shopping, and entertainment, contributing to the development of various service industries in these regions. Now their absence has created a significant gap that businesses need to find ways to fill. This event clearly highlights the importance of maintaining stable diplomatic relations between countries, especially those with strong tourism exchanges like the U.S. and Canada. Decisions in politics and changes in border policies can have far-reaching impacts on the tourism economy, which in turn affects industries reliant on international guests. The U.S. tourism industry can learn from this decline in Canadian visitors about the importance of not being overly dependent on a single source of tourists. Instead of focusing solely on traditional tourism markets like Canada, the U.S. should expand its marketing strategy to target emerging markets such as Asia, the Middle East, and South America. Creative marketing strategies, special offers for international tourists, and the development of new tourism products can help replace the loss of Canadian tourists. For hotel owners and retailers, the lesson here is the necessity of flexibility in adjusting operations during periods of volatility. Rather than relying on one customer group, tourism businesses need to develop diversified income strategies and find ways to attract new customer segments, especially during crises. Tourism experts argue that quickly and accurately grasping changes in international policies and travel demands is vital to the survival of this industry. Therefore, travel companies and tourism organizations need to have the ability to react flexibly to changes in the international travel market. The adoption of new technologies to monitor tourism trends and interact with tourists can help the industry maintain steady and sustainable growth. the decline in Canadian tourism has proven the importance of maintaining stable international relations and diversifying tourist sources. While this drop in visitors has caused significant losses to the U.S. tourism economy, it also presents an opportunity for the industry to learn and develop more sustainable strategies in the future. Hopefully, this lesson will help U.S. tourism managers and businesses develop a better future where tourism is not only a source of income but also a bridge between countries, fostering peace and shared prosperity. The decline in Canadian visitors has had noticeable effects on the tourism economy in many of the U.S.'s prominent regions. Florida is a prime example of how the absence of Canadian tourists has significantly reduced the local tourism revenue. Florida has always been a top tourist destination, known for its beautiful beaches, amusement parks, and warm tropical climate. Every year, Florida welcomes millions of tourists from around the world, with Canadians accounting for a substantial portion of these visitors. For years, Canadian tourists have contributed significantly to Florida's economy through activities such as renting vacation homes, participating in tours, dining at local restaurants, and shopping at malls. However, in recent years, due to changes in border policies and political developments, the number of Canadian visitors has dropped dramatically. Reports from tourism businesses in Florida show that the absence of Canadian tourists has led to a noticeable decline in revenue. Hotels and resorts have seen lower occupancy rates, while local shops and restaurants are no longer experiencing the strong spending habits of Canadian tourists. These visitors typically come to Florida during the winter to escape the cold back home and are willing to spend on long-term activities, from renting vacation homes to dining out and shopping at large stores. In the past, Canadian tourists not only came to Florida for sightseeing, but also spent more on long-term services. Canadian families often rented vacation homes or apartments for the entire winter, spending large amounts on dining at local restaurants, as well as participating in recreational activities such as boating, visiting amusement parks, or taking local tours. These expenditures contributed significantly to the maintenance of restaurants, retail stores, and entertainment services in Florida. However, the absence of Canadian tourists has drastically changed spending habits. Families who once spent lavishly on long-term activities are now more cautious or have stopped coming to Florida altogether, resulting in a decline in spending. Instead of staying for long periods at resorts, many tourists now only visit for short durations or seek alternative destinations with lower costs or fewer political impacts. As the number of Canadian tourists has decreased, restaurants, retail stores, and entertainment services in Florida have been faced with a severe revenue drop. Restaurants, which have long depended on international visitors, especially Canadians, have seen significant decreases in customer numbers. Not only have revenues fallen, but restaurants have also had to adjust their employee working hours to align with the new situation. This has led to many employees not earning enough to maintain their livelihoods, and some stores have had to reduce staff or cut hours, which impacts service quality and the viability of businesses. Retail stores are no exception. Large shopping malls in Florida, which were popular destinations for Canadian tourists, are now witnessing a drop in revenue. Famous brands and souvenir shops are facing a decline in customers, especially during peak tourist seasons. This creates a vicious cycle where lower revenues result in insufficient budgets to sustain operations or expand businesses. To cope with the absence of Canadian tourists, regions like Florida need to find ways to diversify their tourist sources and enhance their marketing strategies. Instead of focusing solely on one specific customer group, tourism businesses should explore new markets, such as countries in Asia, Europe, or South America, where there is significant potential for tourism growth. In addition, flexible tourism policies and attractive offers can help draw international visitors, particularly during difficult times. Furthermore, businesses need to adjust their strategies to align with changing consumer behavior. Increasing investment in online services, developing long-term travel products, and creating special promotions can help maintain a stable flow of tourists and mitigate the impact of the absence of Canadian visitors. The decline in Canadian tourism is not only a warning about the impact of politics on the tourism industry, but also an opportunity for U.S. tourism businesses to reassess sustainable development strategies. Changes in spending habits and the drop in revenue are factors that need to be carefully considered, and from this, Businesses can learn how to be flexible and creative to survive and thrive in this ever-changing environment. The significant decline in Canadian tourists has had profound consequences, not only for major cities like Florida and Las Vegas, but also for border towns and small communities, where international tourism, especially from Canada, plays a crucial role in sustaining the local economy. Border cities such as Buffalo, Maine, and Vermont have long been popular tourist destinations for Canadian visitors. Due to their favorable geographic locations, these cities have frequently welcomed large numbers of Canadian tourists, especially during holiday seasons and extended vacations. Canadian visitors not only come to these areas for sightseeing, but also spend generously on services like shopping, dining, and accommodations. However, the recent decrease in Canadian visitors has created serious impacts on the economies of these border cities. Retail stores, restaurants, and entertainment services, which have heavily relied on Canadian tourists, now face a dramatic drop in customer numbers. Retail shops are seeing significant revenue losses as they no longer have Canadian tourists willing to spend on high-end items or local specialty products. Losing such a large number of customers, especially international ones, has led many stores and restaurants to struggle with their operations. Small shops in border areas that once relied on Canadian tourist spending are now facing closures or reductions in staff hours. Restaurants with significantly fewer customers are unable to maintain their workforce, forcing them to reduce hours or eliminate non-essential services to save costs. This situation not only causes economic damage, but also affects the livelihoods of those working in the service industry. Restaurant owners and small store owners are faced with difficult decisions about whether to maintain their staff or shut down, leading to fewer job opportunities in these communities. Small communities near the border, which rely heavily on the tourism industry, have been deeply and permanently affected by this decline. The reduction in Canadian visitors has not only impacted small businesses, but also directly influenced the income of local residents. In small towns, many people depend on tourism-related jobs such as hotel staff, tour guides, or retail workers. When Canadian tourists are no longer visiting, these jobs vanish, leading to increased unemployment and significant income reductions in these communities. Furthermore, some local investment plans, such as building new tourism infrastructure or expanding resort services, have been delayed or canceled. Investors, who had hoped for an influx of international tourists, are now forced to adjust their plans to cope with the uncertainty of tourism income. The absence of Canadian tourists has forced service and retail companies to reduce staff. The income loss and lack of job opportunities not only affect those directly employed in tourism, but also have a wider impact on the overall economy of border towns. Workers unable to find new jobs in the area are facing difficulties, as most available jobs are tied to the tourism sector. Local families are facing financial hardship due to the loss of stable income. Many families have to cut back on spending for essential needs such as food, healthcare, and education, creating a vicious cycle that is hard to break. The income reduction not only affects the quality of life, but also hinders the long-term development of these communities. Business owners and investors in border areas have had to adjust their investment and resort plans. Previously, they expected increased investment in infrastructure and services to cater to the large number of Canadian tourists. However, the current situation has forced them to pause or postpone these projects. Plans to build new hotels, resorts, or amusement parks have been delayed due to concerns over the decline in international tourist numbers and the unstable economic climate. Moreover, the absence of Canadian tourists has also impacted local recreational activities. Border areas, once famous for their tours, outdoor activities, and special events, are no longer attracting the same level of visitors. This not only reduces the area's appeal, but also creates challenges for future tourism development plans. The decline in Canadian tourists has had a severe impact not only on major cities, but also on border towns and small communities. What do you think about this situation? Can these communities find solutions to cope with these changes and recover their economies? Comment 1 if you agree, or 0 if you disagree. Enjoy the video and don't forget to like, share, and leave us a subscription to support the channel and continue following interesting stories about the impact of tourism and the ongoing economic challenges. In recent years, A strong boycott movement has emerged in Canada against American products, which has become a significant factor impacting the U.S. economy, especially in export industries. Canadian consumers' actions, such as refusing to spend money on American food products, wines, and whiskeys, have led to a substantial shift in consumption habits and severely affected certain U.S. industries. One of the key drivers behind the boycott in Canada is the refusal to purchase American products. Canadians have started to avoid spending money on American-made goods, particularly food products, wines, and whiskeys. This movement is largely driven by political tensions and dissatisfaction with U.S. government policies. The Canadian community has demonstrated its opposition by actively avoiding American-made food products or brands of wine, reflecting discontent with U.S. decisions. In addition to directly boycotting American products, many Canadians have sought alternatives, opting for domestic products or those from other countries. Canadian brands and manufacturers have benefited from this shift as consumers return to their homegrown products, creating a new cash flow in the local economy. The boycott is not just a rejection of American products. It is also a powerful patriotic statement by Canadians. One of the ways consumers carry this out is through scanning barcodes on products before purchasing them. Mobile apps have been developed to help consumers check the origins of products, allowing them to make purchasing decisions based on a sense of patriotism. The development of these apps has changed the shopping habits of many people. Some communities have even organized campaigns to encourage Canadians to only buy domestic products or items from countries without political disputes with Canada. This situation not only affects American businesses, but also creates a powerful wave of consumer action in Canada, impacting markets for American exports. One of the most affected industries from this boycott movement is the American wine industry. The Canadian boycott of American wines has led to a more than 60% drop in wine exports to Canada. Canada has long been an important market for the U.S. wine industry, but changes in Canadian consumption habits have dramatically reduced sales for American wine producers. Famous wine brands from regions like Napa Valley, California, once popular in Canada, now face a sharp decline in consumption. This impact is felt not only by small wine producers, but also by large companies as they face revenue and profit losses. The American wine industry has not only lost a large portion of the Canadian market, but also faces increasing competition from countries like Chile, Argentina, and European nations, which are ramping up exports to the Canadian market. This situation presents a significant challenge for American wine producers in maintaining their market position internationally. The Canadian boycott is not just a temporary reaction, but may create long-lasting effects on the U.S. economy. When American products lose support from a large market like Canada, it not only affects specific industries, but also creates a consumer backlash that could spread to other countries, especially in the context of globalization and interconnected economies. The U.S. export industry, particularly in food, wine, and consumer goods, will face major challenges in regaining market share and rebuilding international consumer trust. Effective marketing strategies and the maintenance of stable diplomatic relationships between nations will be crucial in preventing boycott movements from spreading and causing long-term damage to the economy. The boycott of American products by Canadians has had severe consequences for U.S. industries, especially in the food, wine, and consumer goods sectors. The patriotic actions of Canadians, through avoiding American products and seeking alternatives, have created a significant shift in consumption habits and deeply impacted the U.S. economy. U.S. businesses and manufacturers will need to develop flexible solutions to cope with this situation, from creating effective marketing strategies to maintaining stable diplomatic relations with international partners. Tourism has always played a crucial role in the U.S. economy, and in recent years, shifts in consumer habits and tourist demographics have significantly impacted some of the nation's top tourist destinations. A clear example of this is the shift in cities like Las Vegas, which have moved from primarily catering to Canadian tourists to seeking new markets such as China and Mexico. However, this shift has not been easy and is filled with challenges. In the past, Las Vegas and many other popular U.S. tourist cities were heavily reliant on large numbers of Canadian visitors. Due to the proximity and stable diplomatic relations, Canadian tourists became a key part of the tourism revenue for these cities. They regularly visited the U.S. for vacations, participated in entertainment activities, shopped, and spent considerable amounts on travel services. However, changes in border policies and political factors have drastically reduced the number of Canadian tourists, forcing cities like Las Vegas to look for alternative markets. China and Mexico have become two potential markets that U.S. tourist cities are now targeting. China, with its large population and growing middle class, is seen as a promising market for U.S. tourism. Additionally, Mexico, with its geographic proximity and stable flow of tourists, is also an important option for U.S. cities. However, the shift from Canadian tourists to these new markets is not a simple process. These markets not only have different characteristics and consumption habits, but also pose several challenges related to language, culture, and how to tailor tourism services to meet their needs. Canadian tourists were very familiar with U.S. tourism services. Travel between the two countries was easy and affordable, making Canadian tourists a loyal customer base for U.S. tourist destinations. But shifting focus to markets like China and Mexico is not without its difficulties. Chinese tourists, despite their strong financial potential, have different needs and consumption habits. They often seek unique experiences that differ from what they have back home. Moreover, many Chinese tourists tend to travel in groups or through large tour packages, requiring U.S. travel companies to adapt their tours and entertainment activities to accommodate these preferences. Mexico, while geographically and culturally closer, has its own distinct travel habits. Mexican tourists tend to seek more local destinations, lower costs, and family-oriented experiences. Adapting marketing strategies to attract Mexican tourists requires a deep understanding of this market and creating more suitable tourism products. The shift from Canadian tourists to new markets like China and Mexico also reflects a broader change in the consumption habits of international travelers. Canadian tourists, who were accustomed to U.S. tourism services, often spent more on long vacations, renting vacation homes, dining at upscale restaurants, and participating in high-end entertainment activities. In contrast, tourists from China and Mexico have different consumption patterns. Chinese tourists often look for premium, unique experiences, but also seek more budget-friendly options for independent or small group travel. Meanwhile, Mexican tourists, although culturally similar, tend to look for more budget-conscious services and family or community-based experiences. This requires U.S. travel businesses to adjust their approach and develop products that suit each specific customer group. Travel companies need to build flexible marketing programs and tailor their services to meet the diverse needs and preferences of tourists from these emerging markets. One of the biggest challenges the U.S. tourism industry faces is reclaiming lost customers, particularly Canadian tourists. These tourists were very familiar with U.S. tourism services and could easily return if there are changes in policies or more favorable conditions. However, replacing them with markets like China and Mexico is no simple task. U.S. travel businesses will need to invest heavily in marketing strategies and product improvements to attract back those tourists who have left, while also maintaining their appeal to new markets. This may involve developing special promotions, organizing international events, and creating tourism services that cater to each target market group. The future of U.S. tourism is facing significant challenges as it shifts from Canadian tourists to new markets like China and Mexico. This transition is not an easy one and requires tourism businesses to quickly adapt to changes in consumer habits and the needs of international tourists. While seeking alternative markets is necessary, it is crucial for travel businesses to develop sustainable strategies to maintain their appeal to traditional tourists, while also expanding their offerings to meet the needs of emerging markets. In today's political environment, decisions related to tariffs, foreign policies, and sanctions may yield political victories for leaders or governments. However, these victories can sometimes result in significant economic damage, particularly affecting ordinary citizens, especially those working in small businesses and service industries. Amid tariff wars and other political decisions, labor groups such as hotel owners, restaurant staff, and taxi drivers are the most directly and severely impacted. Tariff wars are often used by politicians as a tool to protect domestic industries or to apply pressure on other countries. However, While politicians may believe they've achieved their objectives of safeguarding domestic industries or pressuring international rivals, these decisions can have severe repercussions on the U.S. economy, particularly for ordinary people and small businesses. When tariffs are applied to imported goods, the prices of these products rise, leading to higher living costs for the general public. This impact is especially severe for low and middle-income individuals, who spend a large portion of their income on everyday consumer goods. A prime example of this is when tariffs were imposed on products from China, leading to increased prices for electronics, consumer goods, and food, creating a significant financial burden for lower-income households. One of the groups most directly impacted by political decisions is workers in the service and tourism industries. Hotel owners, restaurant staff, and taxi drivers are the most vulnerable when international tourist numbers drop, or when tourists reduce spending due to trade and diplomatic policies. Hotel owners. Political decisions, especially those related to travel restrictions or tariffs on tourism services, can lead to a sharp decline in international visitors. Hotel owners in cities reliant on international tourists, particularly from countries affected by tariff wars, may suffer major losses. A drop in the number of visitors forces hotels to lower room prices, cut spending on services, or even lay off staff to maintain operations. Restaurant staff. The restaurant industry also suffers heavily when tourist numbers decline. Policies such as tariffs on imported goods can increase food and service costs, making customers hesitant to spend. Restaurant staff, particularly in small establishments or those located in tourist-heavy areas, may experience reduced working hours or even job loss. This not only impacts their income, but also harms the local economy in tourist areas. Taxi drivers. Similarly, taxi drivers and other transport services are impacted when tourist numbers drop. Policies that restrict or limit international travel or increase travel costs may force taxi drivers to face reduced income. These political decisions affect not only taxi drivers, but also related services such as freight transport, tour buses, and other transport industries. Wider economic impact. The effects of political decisions are not confined to specific sectors. They have far-reaching consequences for the U.S. economy. When small businesses such as restaurants, hotels, and transport services are affected, it leads to a decrease in revenue and profits, which in turn impacts their ability to sustain operations and create jobs. Reduced consumer spending also leads to declines in production and distribution in other industries. This can cause a ripple effect, with small businesses cutting staff or reducing production capacity. When people lose jobs or face income reductions, they cut back on their own spending, which reduces demand for products and services in the economy, creating a vicious cycle that affects the entire national economy. While political decisions may benefit large industries, they can have devastating consequences for ordinary citizens, especially those working in the service and tourism sectors. Tariff policies and sanctions may drive up prices and reduce international tourism, significantly affecting the income of hotel owners, restaurant staff, and taxi drivers. This does not only impact these sectors, but can also lead to widespread consequences for the U.S. economy as a whole. It is crucial for political decisions to be carefully considered to ensure that the benefits achieved do not come at the expense of ordinary citizens. The decline in Canadian tourism and the widespread boycott of U.S. products by Canadian citizens is not just a temporary financial issue, but a stark reminder of the long-term consequences of political decisions on the U.S. economy. Canada is not just an important trade partner, but also a long-standing ally of the U.S. When political decisions, such as tariffs or sanctions, cause Canadians to turn away from American products and services, it can create a rift in the trade relationship between these two nations. These changes will not only affect financial figures, but also profoundly impact the long-standing trade relations between the U.S. and Canada. Trust, built over many years between citizens and businesses in both countries, could be shaken if political decisions are not carefully considered. This influence goes beyond just reduced revenues. It also signifies a shift in how cooperation and trade will unfold in the future. If this relationship is not maintained and strengthened, it could lead to a decline in the ability to collaborate over the long term between these two major economies. Small businesses in particular, and industries dependent on international trade, will face difficulties in sustaining growth if there is no consensus or stable cooperation between the U.S. and key trade partners like Canada. Will ordinary Americans continue to pay the price for political decisions made far away in Washington? If you were in Canada's position, would you return to the U.S.? Thank you for watching today's video. As we've seen, the decline in tourism and the boycott from Canada impacts not only the economy, but also the long-term relationship between the two nations. If you found this story interesting, don't forget to leave a like and share this video with your friends. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button to always stay tuned to exciting videos and important stories that affect our lives. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss our next video. Thank you so much.